What's up, everybody? We are so happy to be bringing this to you finally on the books. Mason, we tried to get you on here before, but we've been trying to wrap this up and get this going, and finally we are ready to rock.
Yeah, we're super excited. Mason's like one of our favorite people, obviously one of our favorite recruiters.
That's right.
And this is obviously a recruiter-free zone.
Our group,
right?
Yes.
But we thought it'd be really fun to bring Mason on and just get this different inside scoop, different perspective of what's really going on behind the scenes after we get submitted for a job. Like, how are we getting these jobs?
Mm-hmm.
What helps a traveler stand out to really land these jobs,
Right.
and just kind of get it from a totally different perspective.
And we've had a lot of great questions come in. You guys have been asking some awesome questions,
Yeah.
so we have those down. We are going to go over those. We're going to cover as many as we can. But Mason, first off, do you want to just introduce yourself, what you do, how long you've been doing it, and maybe just why you love what you do, if you do?
Oh, absolutely. You don't do this for as long as I have without loving it. Well, thank you. Thank you both for having me. I really appreciate it. My name is Mason Stebbins. I'm Director of Recruitment here at Club Staffing, which is also a division of AMN Healthcare. I've been with Club Staffing for almost 11 years. It's going to be 11 years in about 3 weeks now. So we're coming up really quick. It's flown by. Obviously, we've seen a lot of changes in the industry over those, 10 plus years. But my reason why I'm still here is I'm just passionate about people. You really get a lot of satisfaction out of this job as a recruiter because you get to really see people grow and develop professionally, achieve a lot of their personal goals. I know I've seen both of you, really grow and change a lot, and it's been a fantastic journey. So I just love to bring people kind of into the industry and watch them flourish. So it's really satisfying.
I love that.
I love that. And I also love your palm trees and background as I'm sitting in my North Face. We're in Connecticut and it's like 30 degrees and freezing.
Yeah.
Very, very spoiled, although I'll tell you what, I was out playing golf this weekend. It was about 90 degrees.
Yeah.
And I would have traded places with you. So
totally.
I agree. And we're about
be
to
careful
head
what
that
you
way.
wish for.
Yep.
Yeah, we're about to head that way. So we're getting ready for it. We're hoping to bring the storm. I'm going to try to hook it up to the car and bring it down.
Tow it right down.
Yeah, get some cold down there.
Bring some fall for sure.
Yeah.
We would love it.
All right, so we are going to just dive into some great questions. Like I said, we have a lot of questions that you guys have asked, the travelers have asked, and we're just going to get into this and just have a fun conversation and really share some of the inside juicy scoop with you guys.
Yeah, so this first question popped up last night. We do trainings in traveler school on Thursdays usually, and one of our students actually popped up and had this awesome question. And so what we want to do is bring this to you first. We think it's a great one. So I actually really want to hear the answer as well. And it is, if a company says they don't know the bill rate or the pay package until after submission, what does that mean and why would that happen? And then to follow up, especially when the traveler has seen the pay packages for the same job, kind of like maybe on a job board or somewhere like that, it kind of leaves them feeling like, what's going on? You know, why is this happening?
And just before you answer that, I just want to preface too, because obviously our travelers know that we teach that before you do an interview, you want to have the pay package. You want to already go over it a little bit, have an idea so that when you say yes, because the pay feels good, everything else feels good, you do the interview, that feels good, you're like, yes, I want the job. So we always say it's really important to get that pay package before so that you know going into it if it's a good fit for you or not. So this traveler doesn't have the pay package, apparently.
Yeah, absolutely. So from a recruiter's standpoint, there could be a few reasons why we don't have necessarily the exact pay package at the time that we're going to be submitting you to the position. And there could be a few reasons. One, that could be a new facility that the agency has never worked with before, so they haven't negotiated the exact bill rate. So that's probably why your recruiter doesn't maybe feel comfortable telling you, hey, this is exactly what the pay is going to be, because we don't know. It could be that we have kind of a bill rate range with that client. So we have a general idea, but again, we haven't specifically said, this is what we're going to be, charging for a traveler, or the hospital or the facility hasn't said, this is what we're willing to pay for a candidate. A lot of the vendor management websites that are out there now have a bill rate negotiable kind of clause. So they'll give us a general idea. The facility will say, here's what we ideally would like to pay for a traveler, but it's negotiable. And so we can submit candidates on an individual basis and say, here's what Kim needs, here's what Erran needs for this particular position. So it's kind of fluid, and the facility doesn't necessarily have to agree to that. They could interview you and offer you the position and then come back and say, well, we know you submitted Kim at X rate, but we'd really like to get $2 an hour less or $3 an hour less. We're still kind of going back and forth. Now, what a really great recruiter can do is say, the bill rate's negotiable, let's work on this together. Right? What do you need to get to Colorado? What do you need to get to Virginia? Let's talk about some of those different travel scenarios, housing scenarios. Let's kind of work on it together, and I'll submit you at that rate, and then I'll let you know what feedback I get. Is it too high? Is it too low? And we can kind of take it step by step. Different agencies may be kind of guesstimating what they think they can get from a particular client and posting that online. Or different agencies are going to try and maybe get a stronger package or have a little bit more money that they're going to be earning on a contract. So sometimes it's very fluid, right? It's not like set in stone. This is what this job is paying. It's
Right.
kind of a work in progress.
Okay.
Right.
So as this traveler, so communication is obviously the most important thing, right? Just having this conversation, but just saying like, hey, I understand that maybe there's not a specific bill rate in place, but do you have a ballpark so I can just kind of get an idea? I know it could go up or down, but just a general idea if this feels good to me.
And I also, we've been through this personally. And, and so I've never felt like it's just been like, what is it? We've talked. So I have a range, and I know that it can change, but it's very rarely not what you said it was either. So
exactly, unless we totally get blindsided by the facility and they just go the total opposite way that we thought. Again, a really good recruiter can sit down, work through those different scenarios with you and give you a range and say, here's kind of what we can do. Here's kind of what we think the facility would agree to, because we don't want to, especially on those vendor positions, we don't want to overprice and price you out of the job, right? Request a rate that's so high that they just won't consider you. They have too many other candidates that are willing to accept a lower pay package. But, you definitely should be discussing that with your recruiter and walking them through and working through that process.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
That's awesome.
Great.
So could they, I guess, so it's all in communication. So if I came to you and I was like, I don't really feel comfortable with this. This makes me feel uncomfortable. What could be said? I mean, just that explanation, I think alone would do it for me. So I guess that's what the answer is from the travelers.
Yeah, and the recruiter can, and you will, again, maybe have some newer clients where we just have no idea really where they're at, what this facility is thinking as far as pay package wise. But again, communication is key. So the recruiter needs to tell you that, hey, this is a new client. We have no idea what they're willing to pay right now for a sonographer, for a CT tech. Let's at least get your name in for the job, and then I'll continue to work with all my counterparts at the agency, with our account manager, or with the facility directly. And I will let you know as soon as we have some updates and some feedback, because they should be able to give you an idea, hopefully before you interview, certainly obviously right after, but it's all, like you said, communication is key.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So jumping ahead, just because I feel like this is a good timely question, but we talk so much about our industry moving so fast. It's all about, moving quick, getting submitted. And sometimes I know a lot of people will say that their recruiters say, listen, like, we don't have time to necessarily break down the pay package. Like, we need to submit you to get you in, so hopefully you get an interview. So we understand that quickness is really important. So in a situation like this, where you're like, hey, it could be this, it could be this, we're kind of going back and forth, would that slow down the process? Just, is your main focus to want to submit these travelers, and how does that work with getting your pay package up front?
Yeah, it does slow down the process because obviously the recruiter has to work through that, right? It takes them a little bit of time for them to work up a specific pay package for you or a couple different scenarios and give you that range. One thing that you can kind of do is say, I don't know what the rate is just yet. Let's work on a couple different options. We can, at minimum, submit you to the position. And then if it turns out the pay doesn't work, we can take you right out of the job, right? We can always kind of put you in and then take you out, usually well before the client honestly has even reviewed your profile. So it's kind of no harm, no foul. But that is a little bit of the balance between speed to market and trying to get your profile in for the position as quickly as possible and trying to make sure that we do our due diligence and have worked up pay for you and you have a good idea of what that job is kind of all about, the area and kind of the particulars, because all of our data shows that department managers 80% of the time they're going to hire somebody that's one of the first 5 profiles that are sent to them. So if you're not one of the first 5 people that are submitted to the job, you have reduced your chances of getting that interview and offer by 80%. Wow. So that's where recruiters are coming from. That's why recruiters are so kind of pedal to the metal. Let's get you in as soon as possible, because they know if you're outside of that first 5, you only got about a 20% chance of getting the job.
Wow.
That's crazy.
The first 5. Now, is that the first 5 that they're looking at the resume to say, oh, this would be a good fit. Oh, this would be a good fit.
Or is that the first 5?
Or is it just like general first 5?
It's, that's from the department manager's perspective.
Right.
So if you kind of take yourself and put yourself in that department manager's shoes, they're waiting for traveler profiles to come in and they start to be emailed to them. They get about 5 profiles. They're going to review those first 5, and they're probably going to pick 1 or 2 people out of that first 5 to interview. They're not really getting to candidate 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They're figuring, hey, let me look at these first 4, 5, 6 that get sent over. I'll pick somebody out of that group. Now, if I don't see anyone that I like, or I do some interviews and they're not a great fit, then I'll get to candidate 7, 8, 9, and 10. That's where that other 20% come from.
Okay.
But yeah, that's typically the average right now is about 80% chance if you're one of the first 5 sent over.
Wow. So do you have any good tips for the traveler to be one of those first 5 people? I know from your end, you are always monitoring the job. So if you're seeing a job pop up and you're like, whoa, okay, I know this is, Kim wants this. I'm going to call her. Hey, does this work? Here's a quick pay package. Let's get you submitted. How does that work from both ends of getting to be that first 5?
Well, the first step is you really want to make sure that you've completed the application process with that agency, right? If you're waiting to see that ideal job in order to complete your app, you're too far behind in the process. You really want to find those agencies and recruiters that you really feel good about, that you really want to work with, and you want to make sure you've completed the entire application process. They've got your work history up to date. They've got really great job description on file. You've got your references. Everything is ready to go. So as soon as that job comes in, the recruiter can call you and say, hey, what do you think? Boom, let's put you in. We're not playing catch up. The other thing is obviously just be responsive to your recruiter. If they, email or text you or call you with the position, try and get back to them as soon as possible. Believe me, as recruiters, we understand everyone's, busy. You're, working, you're with your patients. So it's kind of hard sometimes to get back to us right away. So hopefully we've had a conversation about, what are your kind of ideal goals? What are you looking for in a position? And really, again, goes back to that communication. If I know what you're looking for from a location standpoint, from a clinical standpoint, from a pay package standpoint, then hopefully we have enough trust between the two of us that I can say, here's this perfect opportunity. Let me go ahead and put Kim in for it. I'm going to call you and contact you immediately. And if for whatever reason you're just not interested in that job, no problem. We'll take you out of the position. Again, probably before your profile even gets sent over. But, that's really kind of the key to being fast, is just being, making sure your app is prepped, ready to go. You're responsive with your recruiter. and the two of you are kind of communicating back and forth in kind of a timely fashion.
Yeah. Wow. That's like crazy.
I know.
That's like, you think 5 and there's thousands of travelers, like how competitive that is to like slide in
Right.
and be like that first couple of
I know.
people.
Well, I have
Go ahead.
one based off of what you said,
Mhm.
because it triggered a question that a lot of our travelers have, that even on their first, when they're submitting all of those, all the references and they have a tough time with references.
Ooh, I wrote that down.
Did you?
Mhm.
Oh, good. And so a lot of places don't want to tell their place they're leaving. And you guys, and I know a lot of travel companies need supervisory references. And so that can be tough. And then also some places are saying that their supervisors won't give references by the HR standards. And so what are some ways that travelers can get around that? Because I know that comes in all the time to the group. And so
They're like, I can't complete my process to even get in with this company because I don't know what to do about the references. And I feel at like a standstill with this and I don't know how to move forward. So what are
the number one workaround that we use is performance evaluations. So if you've been at a facility longer than a year, per the Joint Commission, they're supposed to be performing an annual evaluation with you. So if you know you have an annual evaluation coming up, make sure you request a copy of it. If you are using previous evaluations, typically human resources should have a copy of that on file for you, and you can request a copy of that. So that's the number one workaround, is get your performance evaluations. Some of the other kind of workarounds is maybe you feel comfortable using some of like the physicians maybe that you work with, maybe some of like the charge nurses, if you deal with the nursing staff, maybe you feel comfortable with one of them. It doesn't always have to be a department manager. So maybe if you have a lead tech in your department and you feel comfortable using them as a reference, they're not going to kind of tip off the manager that, oh, you're looking for a new position because I was, asked to be a reference. Maybe you have that relationship with them. Are you working any kind of PRN per diem positions? I've certainly had a lot of candidates that we're kind of working through that process, and then they don't mention, oh, well, I do work weekends at this other location. That's perfect. Yes, let's use a reference from there.
Right.
Previous employers, if you've been at your job, say for the last like 2 years, maybe your previous employer, we could use that. So those are a few kind of different workarounds that you can do.
Okay.
Worst case scenario, you can try and submit candidates without references. Just keep in mind that not every facility is going to accept profiles without references. Some of them do have like a mandatory requirement up front saying, look, we won't look at candidate profiles that don't have references, but not every place has that requirement. So you can try and at least submit that candidate to position. And then once you do get them a travel assignment and they do give their notice, then hopefully their supervisor is able and willing to be used as a reference.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good to know though, just to get the ball rolling, just to have different options so that they can submit their skills checklist, their resume, their references, and just be in the application to be in the system. So when the jobs are coming up, that they can go ahead and get in the go, right?
Yeah.
This is a question that we get all the time. If you say you're one of the 5 and the company knows we want to interview this person, it seems like a great applicant, we're going to go ahead and email, or we're going to set up a time for an interview. If they want to interview you, typically, I know this is always going to change across the board depending on the hospital, but do they call you pretty quick if they want to get you in for an interview? Like if you haven't heard something in like a week, can you pretty much probably write it off? Or
it's hard to say. On average, the turnaround time is usually 3 days. Now, take that with a grain of salt, right? Because some places are going to turn around and call you the same day. Again, like you said, some places might take a week. So that's the average number. It's usually about 3 days. But sometimes the submission process itself is lengthy, right? So we get your profile together. We send it to our contact at the facility, but who knows how many layers it has to go through at the hospital or at that facility before it gets to the department manager.
Right.
Then once it gets to the department manager, what's their schedule like? Are they swamped? Are they, Do they have some sort of, commission or review going on? Are they out sick? Are they on vacation? Sometimes the managers aren't the ones that actually do the interviews too. I know a lot of managers will sometimes
Pass it down.
pass the profile down to one of the lead techs because they can talk more about your technical capabilities.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's hard to say. Your recruiter obviously should be keeping you in the loop. Hey, we haven't heard anything back, or we heard that the profile did go down to the manager. Now we're just waiting on them.
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't have direct contact with the hospital itself. Again, if you're working through a vendor management service. So we're kind of just playing the waiting game. I wouldn't just totally discredit a position because you haven't gotten an interview in a week or two. You might want to say, okay, let's continue to focus on other opportunities. If that particular position was, say, your first choice, you might say, I'm not going to just hold on, wait for this only, one and only position. Let's continue to look for other opportunities.
Right.
But, you just never know until that agency calls back and tells you, hey, the job is closed or the job's been filled. You just don't know.
Right.
Yeah, totally. And I think what you said, like the communication with your recruiter, like checking in, like, hey, have you heard anything? You're so great about that too. Like, hey, I haven't heard anything yet, or we'll check in with you. Have you heard any? Just to have that back and forth so everybody's in the loop and everybody knows what's going on, that you're not just sitting around waiting and it's like radio silence and you have no idea what's going on. It's like, be in contact. And a good recruiter absolutely will not just leave you out in the blind and,
Well, and that's
you
why
never hear from them
we
again.
have great people in our group, but sometimes you just want to be like, okay, I have no idea what's going on here. Sorry. And so I've said, like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. My computer's,
What does it say?
I've been like, what's the simple thing here? Like, communicate. And I feel like that's what's lacking. It's not that, well, I don't know. I haven't heard anything. Well, have you called? And it's like, have you emailed? Have you texted? Like, do you have that line of communication open? And I think that's the biggest thing between, travelers and recruiters. And you can correct me if I'm wrong. But
Yeah, no, a really good recruiter will keep you in loop and let you know kind of where they are in the process, and let you know up front too when they submit you, hey, this is an MSP. This is one of our managed staffing programs where we have an exclusive agreement with this hospital. So we have direct contact with the hospital or with the program director there, and they can kind of keep you in the loop with the lines of communication, right, and how things are progressing. Certainly if we have a direct contract, those are pretty easy where we can pick up the phone and call that director, no problem. Or is it a vendor management position where we're specifically banned from calling into that department? We're completely reliant on the vendor manager to handle all the communication. And so a lot of times we put you in for the position and they actually get mad at us if we ask for updates. They're like, hey, it'll happen when it happens. We're trying to push our client to contact the candidates as fast as possible, but don't ask us for any updates. They literally will tell us that. Stop calling, stop emailing us, and let it be. We'll let you know if the job gets filled.
Right.
So recruiters need to kind of explain that process to their candidates. Understand that we're doing everything that we can to expedite that interview process as fast as possible. We want to get you booked just as bad as you want to get placed.
Right.
But recruiters are very busy, not to make excuses, but we got a lot going on. So if we don't give you any updates, if you haven't heard from us in a couple of days on a particular position, don't be afraid to reach out to your recruiter and say, hey, just want to check in. Where are we in the process? Have we heard anything from this client? And they'll obviously be able to get back to you right away and let you know kind of, have they heard anything? Even if it's just, hey, the account manager says they've reached out to the client multiple times, we just haven't heard anything back, right?
Yeah.
Even no updates is an update.
right.
Totally. And just quickly, for anybody who doesn't understand what a VMS is or a vendor management system, can you just quickly explain kind of what that is and how that's different than you guys having a direct communication with the hospital and the MSPs?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically there's three ways that a facility could hire a traveler. they can do it just directly, right? And that's kind of the older model where facilities would be talking to maybe half a dozen different individual staffing agencies, and they had a direct contract with each individual agency. It had its own terms, and they would have direct contact usually with the account manager. So the account manager would call them, email them, they would call, email the account manager, they would communicate directly about what openings they had and what they needed, and along with the interview and the offer process. So that's kind of one way, is a direct contract. The second way is what's called a vendor management system. So the hospital signs an exclusive agreement with a specific vendor, and when they have a opening that they've approved to use a traveler for, they send that position to the vendor, and then the vendor sends that job out to all the major agencies. Most major agencies are contracted with pretty much all the vendors. And then we submit our profiles back to the vendor, and then the vendor sends it down the chain of command at that facility. And then once you interview and the offer is transferred through the vendor, we confirm everything, and the vendor takes care of like kind of all the back office paperwork, credentialing, contracting. They take care of all of that for the hospital. So the hospital's department managers are focused on their department, not on making a bunch of calls to a bunch of different agencies, lining up interviews and offers and things like that. The vendor's supposed to kind of streamline that process for them. Now, the vendor, is kind of the gatekeeper. So the agencies are specifically banned from going around the vendor and contacting that facility directly. If we get caught doing it, we could potentially lose our contract with that vendor, and not just with that specific health system, but the entire vendor and everyone that they work with. So most agencies will not do that. They don't want to put that contract at risk. But again, the issue is there's that communication barrier, right? So that's where we kind of put you in, and we don't know if we're really going to be getting an interview anytime soon. The third way is what's called a managed staffing provider, or an MSP. So what a lot of health systems are doing now is, instead of having a direct contract or a vendor, they're signing an exclusive agreement with a managed staffing provider, typically a large agency like ours, and we are the largest MSP agency in the country, AMN Healthcare, our parent company. And because then they kind of get the best of both worlds, right? They kind of have a whole protocol and process for approving their travel positions. They have a whole communication chain of command set up, and profiles are, sent directly from the MSP to the client. And typically there's like a staffing program manager that's in charge of kind of all the travel needs. So they're kind of a real go-to point for all the communication. They can give the agency all the updates with where they are in the process. It gives exclusivity to our travel candidates, so that's a great opportunity for you because you have a little bit less competition, and it's a more streamlined process for the hospital because there's not that barrier to communication there.
Right. With the vendor, are they choosing the applicants that they're going to now submit to the hospital, with all the companies submitting to this vendor? Is the vendor looking at them and saying, okay, we're going to submit these candidates to the hospital, like they're choosing?
Well, the vendor usually will sometimes put a limit on how many profiles they're going to accept from each agency. Okay. So again, going back to kind of speed to market and being really fast at getting your profile in, on not all positions, but on a lot of them, they'll say, hey, we're only taking, say, 3 to 5 profiles per agency, and they're going to send those over to the client. Some of them don't have a limit, and we'll kind of upload as many profiles as we can as time permits. And then eventually the vendor says, okay, time out, we've gotten enough profiles. We're not going to accept any more for this particular position. And they'll send over those profiles to the hospital.
Now, how does that work with like being one of the first 5? Because if the vendor's collecting all of the submissions and all the candidates, and then they're sending them all over at the same time, is it still kind of like chronological, whoever sent it to the vendor first?
Yeah, in some cases, yeah, it depends on the vendor and kind of how their system is set up. But yeah, usually it's first in, first out. So if you're the first file put in for the job, you're the first one that gets sent over to the facility.
Okay, cool.
So I think this kind of leads into, just from the talking with the MSP, right here.
Well, I was gonna, before we moved on to that, I wanted to just say, is there anything that you're doing yourself to kind of push your candidate through to hopefully get an interview? Like anything behind the scenes that you guys are doing to like, pick mine, pick mine, pick mine?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, again, we want to get you placed just as bad as you want to get placed on an assignment. So kind of the first step, though, in that process is you as the traveler, as the candidate, you really want to make sure that you're giving your recruiter as much really good detailed information as possible. So what I mean by that is what a lot of the department managers are looking for these days is they want to know specifically what you did at each individual position. And the main thing is they really want to know specifics, right? So they want to know what types of scans, were you doing if you're an imaging professional. If, say, you're in the lab, they want to know what benches did you work on in the lab. Were you, in chemistry, hematology, blood banking? If you're in respiratory therapy, they want to know what specific units did you work in. Were you, adult therapy, working ICU or the emergency department, or are you a pediatric therapist? You've worked NICU, PICU. So they want to see those specific details for each individual position. What equipment were you using? And also what's really big these days is what software were you using, right? So what was that EMR system, that electronic medical record system? They want to see that for each individual position. So make sure you're giving that information to your recruiter, because it's only going to help you. It's only going to make your profile look, as strong as possible. Then as a recruiter, you're certainly trying to kind of add any sort of additional selling points that you can for your candidate to that specific position. So it depends on each unique opportunity, but they're going to try and do their best to put you in the best light, right? So really highlight, my candidate can start right away. They don't need any time off. They're really flexible with their shift or their hours, or here's why they're a match for this position. They've got the equipment that this location is using. They've got the software that they've used before. So they'll kind of have all your highlights and kind of selling points, if you will, that they're going to be sending over to the facility. And yeah, certainly they're going to push where they can to try and make sure that we're doing everything possible to get that facility to turn around and call you as quickly as they can.
Yeah.
So how does it work with, let's say you have 10 recruiters working and they all get this job within your company, right? Mm-hmm. And then you have 10 travelers that are sonographers that you like. Mm-hmm. How does that process work where it's like Mason gets to submit his 5 top favorites, and also kind of a follow-up, how do we get on your top favorites, and how do you select, like, I want these people to go in, and I'm sorry, but I really like these people and they're great, but these people I want to put in for it, right? Like, does that make sense?
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah, well, I mean, as a recruiter, you've got to make that judgment call on who's the best fit for that job. So a lot of it just depends on your skill set, how you match up with that position, what your start date is, because that's such a key component. So many of these department managers, they're so desperate for candidates. They've been short-staffed a lot of times for weeks, maybe months, and now they've finally gotten their job order approved, by their administration. They want to try and get somebody in there right away. So start date's a key factor, as far as a recruiter might say, okay, I'm going to send this candidate because this other one, they can't start for a month. They can't start for 6 weeks. If we've got a limited number of profiles that we can send, we'll probably send the people that are the best match that can start the soonest. And then certainly, as a recruiter, you've built relationships with your long-term travelers that have really kind of proven themselves that they're reliable, they're professional, they're going to do a great job on that assignment. They're going to represent the agency and you personally really well. So yeah, certainly you want to keep your veterans working as much as you can, but we want to get new travelers on board too, right? That's how we grow our book of business. Right. If we just relied on our veterans, eventually people, take other assignments or go perm or take a break. You've got to keep bringing in new candidates because you want to make those new candidates veteran travelers, right? That's how you have a successful career, a decade or longer. So we want to place those new candidates just as much too. It's a balance, but you want to get them started and get them up and running as well. Is just as bad really as your veterans too, though.
Yeah, which kind of leads to the next question then. A lot of travelers in our group, in our school, they're just starting to travel. They're just trying to land their first contract. And a lot of them are not that is challenging, but it's just taking more time than they initially thought. And, they've been submitted, but they're not getting interviews and they're just not finding the job. And I know finding your first contract can be a little bit more challenging or take a little bit more time. So my question is, why is that? And what can they do for their first time assignment to really get their foot in the door and to lock down that first travel assignment?
Well, yeah, I always tell my new candidates, your first assignment is always going to be your hardest to get, right? Because you're new, you're just starting out. So you have to try and be patient. I know that's really hard because you're excited, you're ready to get going, and you've heard all these great things about traveling. So you kind of have to just be patient, know that your recruiter is doing everything that they can to get you placed on the assignment and get you that first contract. You have to be as open as possible, really, as much as you can from a clinical standpoint, from a location standpoint, shift and the hours, if you can be open to maybe working that second shift or even that third shift. The more open you are, the more opportunities are going to be available to you, and the more jobs your recruiters can be able to submit you to, and the higher your chances are of getting that first assignment are going to be. But it's your first contract. So department managers are going to sometimes show a little preference towards people that have worked with that agency or just traveled in general. But it'll happen. You just have to stay patient, and then it'll start to snowball, right? You get that first one, and then that second one's a little bit easier. Now you've shown, hey, I've completed an assignment. I have a positive reference from the assignment that I completed, and then it just starts to get a little bit easier as you move along. But yeah, that first one is the hardest. So you just got to kind of be patient, try and be as open as possible, and it's going to happen.
Yeah.
I remember that like it was yesterday. Like we want to go, and then like we were getting jobs coming through, but then we couldn't really start. But then it's like, are we good? But at that time, I really feel like the jobs were coming through. And we just had to really pick what it was. I mean, that was 7 years ago.
Yeah.
7 years ago.
Oh my God, that's so crazy.
I mean,
But yeah, once you get your foot in the door.
It was like.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of like hurry up and wait sometimes.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just the mix of the jobs, right? It just depends on what we have at that moment. And so sometimes it's funny, the travel industry, you'll have a couple of weeks where it kind of slows down. And then all of a sudden it's like all the directors got together and they're like, this is the week we're going to hire all the travelers.
Right.
So just try and be as open as possible, as flexible as possible, and just keep those lines of communication open with your recruiter. And eventually it's going to happen.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah. Love it.
Yeah.
All right. Shoot.
I think you've been skipping around on to make sure I'm not double answering questions.
Yeah.
So I guess from your perspective,
talked about that
we kind of did, but I mean, maybe a little bit more detail, like from your perspective, like what would make a standout traveler? Like we hear people talking around the industry, the whiteboard travelers, the travelers that make it to, that top notch. It's in the office. It's going across the, the newsbreaker, like your name. And so everybody sees it.
Across the scroll.
Yeah. What would your advice be for travelers to achieve?
I think the main thing is so from a professional standpoint, if you have the ability to maybe gain additional certifications, right? If your specialty warrants it, try and go after and get those additional certifications, right? Get more letters next to your name is kind of what I was always told. That's always going to help you. Talk to your recruiter about those really kind of hot states if you're in a licensed specialty, to see maybe should we be proactive and to pick up a couple of state licenses, because a lot of positions these days, they're not willing and able to wait, say, a month or longer to get their specific state license. So you got to have that license in hand. So if you can do that, that's going to make you more marketable and ultimately kind of increase your value as a traveler. If you can cross-train, get a little bit more experience in some other departments, different avenues in your specialty, go for it. Take that opportunity. From kind of more of a traveler perspective, as far as like getting your profile and everything set up, kind of like we talked about, make sure you're giving your recruiter those really detailed job descriptions. Don't worry so much about kind of what I call HR fluff. I took care of my paperwork and records and I communicated really well with the physicians and department manager. Everyone has that stuff. So kind of stick to the facts. What were you specifically doing at that position? What types of procedures were you doing? What units were you working in? What equipment, software did you work with? Try and, again, get as many references as possible, or evaluations, or a combination, because the more of those that you have, the stronger your profile is going to be. And again, increasing your value and your marketability. One thing that's really good is if you have your health records, or you can get your health records, so like physical, TB, immunizations, gather up that information, send that to your recruiter, because that'll help kind of expedite the booking process once you do have your actual offer in hand. And I think the key is just, again, be professional, communicate with your recruiter, be responsive. If you are really on the ball, that's going to impress that recruiter and say, okay, this is a serious candidate. This is somebody who is ready to go. When I reach out to them about something, I have a question for them, they get back to me right away. So if you're just showing that, hey, I'm really aggressive and I'm really hungry to get started, then the light bulb's going to go off in that recruiter sense that, okay, this is a really good candidate. I really need to focus and try and get them placed to the best of my ability.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I know, Kim and I are huge on mindset. So like, interpersonal skills, does how you show up in the facility, does that matter to obviously it matters, let's be real, but is it what counteracts it? Is the interpersonal skills more important than the actual getting the stuff in on time, or does it balance each other, or does anything outweigh, how you show up?
Well, I think, when you're working with your recruiter, right, you want to make sure, you're professional with them, right? Using professional language, you're not cursing, you have a professional voicemail. We laugh all the time in the office. We'll call a candidate and they have a very unprofessional voicemail. And instantly you're thinking, when the department manager calls this candidate, what are they going to think?
Yeah.
Right? So set up your voicemail from the department manager's perspective. Just be simple, basic. Don't put any sort of music or ringtones or anything like that in the background, or making any sort of jokes where you pretend that you're on the line and you go, oh no, this is my voicemail. Nothing's going to turn off a recruiter and anyone who's looking to hire you faster than something like that. Just try and be professional and be personable. We don't have to be best friends, but at least as long as we can have that conversation and we kind of get to know each other a little bit more, that's going to help me get you placed. And then certainly once you get on the assignment, you want to make sure that, you have clean appearance, you're clean, you're kind of cleaned up. If you're a guy, kind of like, hey, make sure you've washed your hair, you don't smell, your scrubs, your clothes are clean, and you don't have to be a, big type A, extrovert personality, where you're going to become best friends with everyone, but just, again, keep it professional, make sure you show up on time, and that'll go a long way.
Well, we always say too, like, just as much as like, we want to trust and have a really honest, good, positive relationship with our recruiter and build that trust with them, they're building that trust with us too as a traveler. And so when you do get your first assignment or any contract, show up, right? And work hard and show up on time. And be personable, be friendly, like do a good job. Don't look at it like I'm only here for a couple of months. I'm just going to come in and out and whatever. It's like build up that trust. Show them like you're a rock star traveler. You're going to get great references. You're going to represent the company well. And like you're somebody that you're somebody the company wants to place because you're an awesome traveler and you work hard and you're friendly. And that goes a really long way. Don't be like a slow traveler just walking in and kind of like schlepping through and going through the motions, because that's not gonna excite anybody, you know, especially your recruiter.
Well, and no, like for instance, me personally, how I'm thinking, I want you to enjoy calling, right? Like when you have something, I want you to be like, oh, I'm calling Erran, and you're not just like, oh God, I'm calling.
To talk to them.
Right, like. And so that's my thought process. And I think naturally you build a relationship because you're your natural self. And if you're looking at it as like, I want Mason to pick up the phone happily, dial my number with a smile because he knows that I'm going to be myself and we're going to have a good conversation. I'm not just going to be like, yeah, what's up? You know, it's like, you know, and so I think that goes far too, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. You don't want to have it as so transactional, right?
Yeah.
Where it's, oh, you give me the job, I do the job, and that's it, right? You want to build that relationship with your candidates. And some of my travelers, like the two of you, we're friends. You know, we really, really enjoy, you know, talking to each other and just about our personal lives. Other people, we don't have that relationship. That's okay. But again, it's still personable and it's still professional. When you go to that facility, you know, like you made a great point, Kim, don't just go in with the perspective of, well, I'm only here for 3 months. So, you know, kind of who cares? I'll do my job. And if they like me, they like me. If they don't, they don't. That's a really bad attitude to have because the travel world is a small world.
Yes, it is.
And, you know, you don't want to start to burn bridges at the facilities that you've worked at and with the agencies that you're working with, because you'd be very surprised how tightly that opportunity kind of closes on you, because it can start to snowball in a negative way, where if you're not doing well on your assignments, you get a negative reference from that manager. Well, now when we go to submit you to that next position, we don't have a reference on file, right? The department manager is saying, well, you just did this 3-month contract, you weren't extended, and that's okay. Not every contract's going to be extended, but you didn't get a reference from them. So then if that process starts to continue, sometimes you'll hit into a wall where it's like, we don't have any references on file for you, and our facility requires, you know, references within a year. And if you can't get any or provide any, then you're kind of locked out of the industry. You know, you won't be able to get any more travel positions. If you know, underperform, you get canceled from the assignment because of, you know, professional or behavioral issues, then that agency, they might give you one more chance, but after that, they're going to say, it's not worth us working with this candidate going forward because they're damaging our reputation and our relationship with these health systems. And you start to burn enough agency bridges, you know, then you're kind of boxed out. Same thing going back to the vendors, right? So if you're on a vendor management position and you get canceled, and if that maybe happens more than once, a couple of times, that vendor might say, hey, we're putting a red flag on this candidate because they've been canceled from 2, 3 of our assignments. We don't feel comfortable submitting this candidate to any more of our other facilities that we work with. So you want to come in with that, again, good, positive, professional attitude. You're there to help, and you're there to do a great job. And, you know, you're representing yourself. Your reputation is everything in this industry. And so it can either really help you or it could really hurt you. So you want to be mindful of that.
Yes. That's such great advice.
I want to jump into, what do you wish travelers understood more about recruiters in the work that you do? Because I know you guys work your tails off.
You guys work your asses off.
Yeah. And
I think a lot of travelers don't have that understanding of like what you guys are really doing and how much work you're putting in. It's just like our recruiters doing this, they're doing this, they're doing this, and it's like, or
almost like an entitlement, like find me the job. Like I'm the one out there working, I'm the one in the trenches, I'm the one going to the hospital, I'm the one bringing money in for this, and they kind of have that entitled kind of feeling, and that is
Yeah.
what we try to nix as much as
Yeah.
we can. But what are some things that you would like to, or you wish more people knew?
I think, and and I understand that a lot of travel candidates don't understand how busy we are. I equate it to kind of being like a stockbroker on the floor of the exchange. They don't have those guys anymore, but if you kind of think about it, I come in the morning and my day is 100 miles an hour and running until the moment I leave. Most of the recruiters, they're coming in early, they're staying late. A lot of us don't take lunches. We're sitting there and it is go, 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 go all day long. Your phone is always ringing off the hook. The emails don't stop coming in. You're getting updates from all of the other candidates, and submissions that you've already sent out. You're getting interviews, offers. You're dealing with, recruiters are really busy. You're kind of part psychologist of kind of part recruiter, kind of part deal maker, so to speak.
Yeah.
So you've got travelers that are dealing with maybe some issues on the assignment or in their personal lives. So it is very busy. It is nonstop. And we've got to make sure that we're kind of doing our best to kind of satisfying everyone
Yeah.
that's kind of at the table, so to speak. Something else too that I think a lot of candidates maybe don't understand is how much work we're doing on the back end for them. So like you guys said, it's not as easy as just, well, I put you in for the job and then my day is done. No, like we're really communicating with those different account managers, trying to make sure your profile looks the best. And then we're working, once you do get an assignment, every step of the way with the back office process. So your credentialing, your travel arrangements, your housing, your benefits while you're there on the assignment. So we're really kind of involved in every little step of the process.
Right.
And you may not kind of see it kind of up front as far as kind of what we're working with and kind of dealing with on a day-to-day basis.
God, my head's like spinning.
I just can't imagine. Like I go to work and I hear the phone all the time. I come home and I don't even want to answer my phone. I'm just like sick of it.
Yeah.
Like I put it on mute. Like I don't want to hear it. I can only imagine when it's ringing in your ear, and that is your form of communication.
Have to pick up.
No, thank you. I bury myself into patience and leave all that other stuff behind.
Behind. Well, and just, if your recruiter isn't maybe giving you those updates, all the time, don't hesitate to reach out to them, right? Because they've got a lot of other things going on. It's not that they don't want to be, communicating with you. It's just that we sometimes just don't have the time. But don't feel awkward about reaching out to them and saying, hey, just wanted to touch base, had a few questions or kind of what's going on with, the positions that I'm in for, or I had a quick question about X, Y, or Z. Don't feel awkward about reaching out to your recruiter. And if they don't get back to you immediately, just understand that they did get your message. They did get your email. They will get back to you as soon as possible. They're just trying to kind of prioritize who has the most pressing kind of need at that moment. And if your recruiter isn't communicating with you well, ask them, just say, I know you're really busy. I understand. But if there's any way that you can kind of maybe try and get back to me within, 24 or 48 hours, I'd really appreciate that. Then they should kind of shape up, so to speak, and start to get back to you in a timely manner. And if they're not, if that behavior continues and you're not getting good communication with them, or you're kind of getting attitude or, negative communication from them, then it might be time to maybe make a few calls and maybe look at some new recruiters and new agencies.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. So now that you just said that, how would that happen within, if I was getting negative feedback, would you call the supervisor or the director and have a conversation first?
Yeah, certainly. If that behavior is kind of continuing and you're just not happy working with that recruiter, certainly call into the agency. You can usually call into their main office number, tell them, hey, I'd like to talk to the manager of, so-and-so, and certainly have that conversation with that recruiting manager, because almost all agencies, they want to know that, right? They'd rather keep you as a candidate and assign you to a new recruiter than to lose you entirely, right?
Right.
And you just decide, well, I'm just going to apply with another agency. So yeah, don't don't feel hesitant or awkward about talking to that manager.
I have one more question.
Okay.
Sorry. And then does that range, we were saying like how busy you are and how you're flowing, does that range from new recruiter to veteran like yourself? Does the new recruiters have more time because they don't have the caseload, or are you like bringing in another recruiter who's maybe new and saying like, I could use your help? How is that working? Because I feel like in that, I mean, to my understanding, the newer ones aren't really having the bulk of all the travelers, right? They're trying to still develop that. Is that true?
Yeah, and their book of business. I mean, certainly even new recruiters are going to be, pretty busy. But yeah, they might have a little bit more time to spend with you, depending on where they kind of are in the process. They're still trying to learn a little bit in some cases. So that's kind of the trade-off maybe that you might be making and working with a new recruiter versus kind of a more veteran recruiter,
right.
Which is, it's natural. But they should be properly trained, and they're going to have, managers that they can go to with questions that maybe they don't have the exact answer to. So you should still be able to get, a good, knowledgeable recruiter who's going to give you great customer service and be able to answer your questions and, help you along in the process. But yeah, newer recruiters, naturally, if they don't have as many candidates, are going to be able to maybe spend a little bit more time with you. But keep in mind, veteran recruiters, you're going to kind of know what your balance is, right? And so, yeah, if you kind of get stretched out to the max, you might say, okay, I need a little bit of help. And they might have someone else kind of step in from time to time to help with kind of more of the basic kind of tasks. But they'll always be there, obviously, to, help you with any kind of your real kind of big questions, so to speak, or issues that maybe pop up.
Cool. Okay. So I have 2 more questions for you.
Where are you coloring?
The first one is, as a recruiter, what's one of your favorite gifts to get from one of your travelers? Or just like, how can a traveler show you love? Like when you love your recruiter and they work hard for you and you have a great relationship and you want to just say like, we appreciate you, we have gratitude. Like what's your favorite like love to get?
Oh, well, I mean, just hearing that from your candidates is enough, that you really appreciate. Certainly we're not out here, we don't want candidates to expect to be sending us
like
gifts all the time. But, every once in a while someone will send something, and certainly it means a lot. It really does that, you've had a candidate that has thought enough to send you, maybe a gift. I've had people that send me stuff from where they are locally. So that's kind of cool. They're different locations, things that maybe you can't get at home, wherever you might be, your home office is. So that's always kind of cool because you're kind of traveling vicariously through your travelers. I know we always love when we just get pictures and photos from where our travelers are. Hey, look at this great spot, because it kind of gives us a little bit more perspective and insight into what you're doing there at that location, how you're enjoying it. And we always kind of share those around the office. Everyone really kind of likes to see that. And honestly, it helps us tell other candidates about that location maybe in the future. They can say, hey, my travelers went up this great hike. There's this awesome national park nearby. There's this great waterfall, or here's kind of a couple cool little things that they did. And you pass along those kind of those little nuggets of information, these little kind of local treasures to your future candidates that might be placed there also as well too.
You guys can live vicariously through all of our adventures.
Absolutely. I'll say this, the number one gift is referrals. That's what recruiters like the most. You send us referrals. We love, that we appreciate.
Totally. And it's it really is, especially now with all the information, all the things that we're all learning together as travelers, and the expectations we have for our recruiters. And obviously the recruiters have expectations for us too, but like really being able to share a recruiter that is doing amazing work and is supportive and is hustling for you and is paying fairly and all the things, like that's like a gift because people aren't sharing as much anymore because they're like, want to make sure it's a good one before you just start like
right. And I think that's what we're trying to educate and empower our travelers as well is know the questions to ask, know how to build the relationship. Because if somebody's not, I mean, it's almost like if mama ain't happy, nobody's happy, right? I mean, it's like if you're not happy or the recruiter's not happy, it's just not going to work. So, you know, building that relationship, being empowered from both ends, right? Having communication. And I really feel like recruiters are very open to learn as well. Like, wait a minute, maybe I've never heard it that way. Can you explain that to me more? And where are you coming from? Because Kim and I always tell our travelers to say, ask why. Why is big. Like, Mason, why do you do that?
Explain it to me,
and are you guys, I mean, of course you guys are open to that, but would you like to speak to it at all? Or do you have anything to say to it? Or?
Well, yeah, I mean, having kind of that that curious candidate is always great. I think a lot of recruiters sometimes get hung up in the just the step-by-step process, right? The day-to-day, like, okay, we just need to get from A to B to C, and they don't explain the why behind it a little bit. I know that's something that I've always kind of prided myself on, and that I try and kind of take my foot off the gas a little bit, spend a little bit more time with those candidates and kind of explain the industry as a whole and kind of why we're doing certain things in the process. So that's really key. But as a candidate, ask those questions because that shows that you're engaged, that you want to learn, that you're really serious about this travel industry and that you want to make a career out of it. So recruiters are going to respect that and it's really going to impress them. And so they, you know, should be more than willing and able and happy to kind of share their knowledge with you.
Yeah, totally. I love that. And you've always been so great about that, just explaining things. Like we've asked you so many different things just to understand different processes because we're people, we like to understand things. You know, the more you know, the more empowered you are, right? And so we just like to understand things and you've always taken the time to walk us through things and we appreciate that so much because you want to be in the know as a traveler. You don't just want to go through things blindly. You want to understand what's happening, you know? So.
Well, I feel the same way, but personally, I know that I'm going to get blasted by this one if I don't have all the answers. So, because she's going to ask the questions. Well, did you ask Mason this? It's gotten to a point where I'm so glad that you represent both of us that I can be like, can you just email him like all your list of questions?
I love questions.
He'll email you questions about my like, you know.
I'm like, I got this. Don't worry.
I'm getting all the details. I'm getting the lowdown on everything.
That's just my nature. What can I say? Okay, the last question we have is right now for any new travelers that are listening, what are like some hot jobs right now in the industry? And we should preference like you specialize in allied, right? You don't do nursing. Okay.
No.
Radiology, therapy. Right. Okay. So what are some hot jobs right now for travelers? What does it look like?
And this was filmed on the week of Halloween. So what is it, 25th of October 2018. So let's mark that because I don't want to be like, well, Mason said on YouTube that I have a hot job. So
yeah, exactly. Right. Well, right now, ultrasound is definitely very strong. So if you're RDMS, certainly if you have a vascular experience, that's a nice plus. If you're RVT to go along with your RDMS is great. There's a lot of jobs on kind of both coasts right now. So the West Coast is really busy. California is kind of the rule of thumb. It doesn't matter what your specialty is. There's probably going to be more jobs in California than there is any other state due to its size, due to its population growth, just because of the overall healthcare need there. That's where a lot of opportunities are located. You know, radiology is doing really well. So CT, X-ray, if you're that combination. MRI is doing pretty good. Again, kind of both coasts. There are some jobs kind of in the Midwest. For some of the radiology states, they just simply don't have enough techs to kind of go around locally. So a lot of them are having to bring in travelers to help out. Med techs and MLTs are always big. You know, especially if you can work second or third shift, that's where a lot of the labs are needing help. And therapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy is a really big need. There's kind of a shift in that industry right now where they're transitioning a lot to home health. So if you have home health experience, if you can gain home health experience and you're in the PT or OT field, that's definitely what I would advise you to do, because long term, that's where that particular job market is going.
Okay. What about echo? Sorry.
Yes, absolutely. Cardiac echo sonographers are definitely in demand. Again, if you have vascular experience along with your cardiac echo, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
We really need pediatric experienced sonographers right now. We're seeing a lot of kind of mixed dual adult with peds positions. So we've got several of those open right now. You don't have to be registered in peds. Just as long as you have really good, strong, solid peds experience, that'll go a long way, because there's a lot of hospitals in need right now for cardiac sonographers for both adult and peds.
Okay.
What about interventional radiology?
What?
Yes, cath lab and IR is very busy, very high in demand. If you're RCIS, that's great, that's fine. But those ARRT techs, we really need candidates with some of those longer licenses. So California with the fluoro permit, it's so in demand. Washington, because of their long licensure process, Texas, and then some of the East Coast states like Virginia, Maryland, DC area, Massachusetts, New York. They really need some help out there. So absolutely, interventional radiology and cath lab is very, very high demand right now.
Cool.
Awesome. And then so basically general radiology, just x-ray, is not popping off right now. So it would be
not yet. I mean, I personally right now wouldn't recommend somebody who's in a straight dedicated x-ray role to maybe leave their current full-time position to travel, unless they really got out there and applied for the California radiology license, Washington State, and they kind of got at least a group of 3, 4, 5 really kind of strong, hard to get licenses before they kind of made that jump and that transition. The jobs are out there. It's just not quite at that level. If you're CT and you've got some x-ray skills, then I would say, let's get a few licenses. You can absolutely keep working throughout the year, no problem. But if you're straight x-ray, talk to your recruiter. But I might be a little cautious. Now, if you're not working, or say you're only working per diem or part-time, then absolutely travel is a really good option for you.
Okay, cool. Perfect. I think that's it from our part. We're going to put Mason's information down below. So if you guys want to get in contact with him, his email, his phone number, all of the things.
But just for this, tell us where we can reach you. So
the easiest way is just you can email me. It's mason@clubstaffing.com.
Okay. Yep, and I'll put that down below. And obviously, if you do get in touch with Mason, tell him Kim and Erran sent you over. You watched this video. And you guys know we would never, we don't recommend people. We only recommend people that we trust and that they're already doing things that we teach inside traveler school. So whatever you're learning in traveler school, you don't have to worry about going and being like, wait a minute, what's happening? So, you're such a plethora of knowledge. We appreciate you always taking the time to walk us through things, and just your hustle and hard work, communication. Like we really value our relationship with you, and just thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to talk with us and our students.
And I personally feel like Kim and I have been just totally blessed, and like we haven't had it as hard. We hear a lot of these stories. And it's like, man, like we just don't have that. And so I want to thank you for all the work that you do for us. It means a lot to us because we just get to do us and just be us. And we know that you got us in your hands and you're going to provide the best for us. So we really appreciate that.
Totally.
Oh, my pleasure. It was great doing this. I'd love to do it anytime. So thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes. Absolutely. Yes. Thank you. And we'll talk soon.
We'll be in touch.
Well, catch up in a little bit.
Okay,
All right.
sounds good.
All right,
Bye.
guys, if you haven't subscribed, subscribe. If not, if you're in this group, you know where to reach us. We're always here for you. So we will see you guys on the next interview.